We open the historical records and find a pattern. A mathematical pattern, precisely encoded in one of the oldest and most copied texts in the world. The first book of the Torah, Genesis. The official explanation tells us this is a religious text, compiled from oral traditions. Yet the evidence reveals a layer of information that challenges this casual origin. The discovery, known as the Torah Code, or Bible Code, emerged when researchers applied a technique called equidistant letter sequences. The method is simple in execution, but profound in its implications. They took the original Hebrew text, removed all spaces and punctuation, transforming it into a single continuous block of letters. Then they chose a fixed numerical interval. They would skip, for example, 50 letters, then another 50, then another 50. The letters thus collected formed words. And not just any words. Here is the reversal of expectation. We would expect to find random combinations, meaningless noise typical of any lengthy text. But what emerged was different. Names of historical figures, dates of significant events, technical terms related to encoded biographies, all appearing intersecting at the same point in the text. The name Hitler intertwined with evil man and Nazi. The phrase moon landing appearing near Apollo 11 and spaceship. All of this encoded in the Masoretic text. The standard Hebrew version established centuries before these events even existed as concepts. The sequence accelerated. They tested other intervals. They found Edison near light bulb and electricity. Einstein intersecting with theory and relativity. Each discovery was a rapid-fire shock. A pattern was emerging from a text of over 78,000 words. But there was a problem. The skeptical scientific community argued forcefully. This was pareidolia, the phenomenon of finding meaningful patterns in random data, like seeing shapes in clouds. Tests with other lengthy books, like War and Peace, would also produce supposed depths if searched thoroughly enough. The debate became fierce. On one side, statistical randomness. On the other, the haunting precision of the connections. The answer came from an unexpected place, pure mathematics. Renowned statisticians, like the late Professor Eliyahu Rips of Hebrew University, published studies in peer-reviewed journals. They created rigorous control models. They compared Genesis with other texts, with randomized versions of the same letters. The results, for many, were shocking. The probability that the codes found in Genesis arose by chance was, in some cases, calculated at less than 1 in 10 million. Everything was wrong. This leads us to an uncomfortable question. If we accept, even for a moment, the statistical validity, what does it mean? How could a text, whose oldest written form we possess dates back centuries before Christ, contain information about 20th century events? We are not talking about vague prophecy, but specific sequences of letters forming precise names and dates. Was it the work of a divine transcriber? Is it an artifact of a human consciousness connected to something greater? Or is it the greatest and most complex coincidence in literary history? We begin our journey here, in the territory of mathematics and absolute mystery. The Genesis Code does not give us answers. It forces us to reframe the most fundamental questions about time, information, and the very nature of the text we thought we knew. We travel from abstract text to a concrete artifact, from encoded letters to an object of clay and metal that rests silent on the shelves of the National Museum of Iraq. It is known as the Baghdad Battery. The official explanation, when it bothers to mention it, is that it was a simple jar for storing sacred scrolls. Yet the evidence tells a different story, a story that smells of acid and copper. The object was discovered in 1936 in the ruins of Kujut Rabu, a Parthian settlement near Baghdad. It dates from approximately 200 BC to 200 AD. Visually, it is modest, a yellowish clay jar, about 13 centimeters tall. Inside it, a copper cylinder, sealed at the base with an asphalt disc. Inside that cylinder, an iron rod. The asphalt perfectly insulated the iron rod from the copper walls, and the jar was corroded, not by water, but by an acidic agent. The inversion is clear. We look at a common jar, but its construction is that of a primitive galvanic cell. Copper and iron, two different metals, immersed in an acidic electrolyte, fruit juice, vinegar, any acidic solution of the time. The principle is elementary. This generates an electrical potential difference. A practical problem arose. What would a battery with less than 1 volt be used for? The answer came elegantly and powerfully, in series. Modern replicas have shown that several of these batteries, connected together, could produce significant voltage. And what do you do with that energy? The most fascinating hypothesis involves another common find from the period: electroplating. We have evidence that the Parthians and Sasanians mastered extraordinary metalwork. Silver and gold objects were often plated, covered with a very thin layer of another metal. The traditional technique required fire and great skill, but electricity offers a superior, clean, and precise method: electroplating. Immerse an object in a solution of gold salts, connect it to the negative terminal of a battery, and gold particles will be attracted and deposited onto it uniformly. We accelerate the logic. They had the materials, they had the empirical knowledge of metallurgy, they had the acid, and they had, before us, the device. The combination is irrefutable in its practical elegance. But there was resistance. Traditional archaeology resists attributing this level of technical knowledge to ancient civilizations. It prefers the simpler explanation: a jar for storing things. However, no residue of scrolls or papyrus was found, only electrochemical corrosion. The inner surface of the copper, in some replicas, gains a peculiar shine after use. The air around the terminals can smell of ozone, a sharp metallic odor. These are sensory details of an active process, not a passive container. This places us before a new abyss in our understanding. We have systematically underestimated the technological pragmatism of our ancestors. The Baghdad Battery is not a magical artifact. It is a tool that suggests the thread of electrical discovery does not begin with Volta in the 18th century, but was touched, used, and perhaps forgotten centuries earlier in Mesopotamia. It forces us to ask, how many other simple, brilliant tools have we catalogued as mere pots simply because we lost the instruction manual? We leave the dry land of Mesopotamia and plunge into the salty waters of the Aegean Sea. In the year 1901, sponge divers near the island of Antikythera came across a Roman shipwreck. Among bronze statues and amphorae, there was a lump of corroded bronze and fused gears. It was catalogued as a curiosity, perhaps a sophisticated astrolabe. The official explanation for decades was that a navigation instrument. However, when the dust of centuries and the marine crust were finally removed, the most perplexing artifact of antiquity was revealed. What emerged was a machine. A complex assembly of at least 30 bronze gears, with teeth cut with triangular precision, mounted inside a wooden and bronze box the size of a large book. Using X-rays and three-dimensional tomography, we were able to see its interior without destroying it. And what we saw shattered our technological timeline. The inversion is total. We believed that mechanisms of such complexity would only emerge with the mechanical clock in the 14th century. The Antikythera Mechanism is from the 2nd century BC, and it was not a simple timekeeper. It was an astronomical analog computer. With a crank on the side, the operator could move forward or backward in time. The gears, a true accelerated sequence of discoveries, calculated and displayed. The position of the sun and moon in the zodiac, the lunar phases, the prediction of solar and lunar eclipses, and even the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. There were dials for the planets Venus and Mercury. All of this in a single portable device. But there was a problem of scale. The precision required to cut these gears, some with 223 teeth to simulate the Metonic lunar cycle, was immense. The differential gear, a component that allows the subtraction of angular velocities, was considered a 16th century invention. The Antikythera Mechanism employs it over 2,000 years ago. The answer to its purpose came from its sophistication. This was not a tool for an ordinary sailor. It was an elite instrument, possibly used by astrologers, philosophers, or for planning religious and civic events. It materialized the Greek vision of an ordered and predictable cosmos, governed by mathematical cycles. When turning the crank of a modern replica, we feel the gentle weight of metallic resistance. We hear the low, precise click of the teeth engaging. It is a sound of calculation, a sound of knowledge encapsulated in bronze. This throws us into a profound paradox. If the Greeks were capable of such mechanical and astronomical mastery, where is the rest? Where are the other mechanisms? The most plausible theory is that this was a rare specimen from a tradition of planetary model builders that simply got lost. Their knowledge was swallowed by wars, the fragmentation of the Roman Empire, the Dark Ages. The Antikythera Mechanism is not merely an artifact. It is a ghost. The ghost of a technological path that humanity began to tread and then abandoned. It asks us, silently, how many times we have discovered the future, only to bury it at the bottom of the sea of our own forgetting. We leave the mechanical precision of the Greek world and travel to the coastal desert of Peru. Here, in the 1960s, a local physician named Javier Cabrera Darquea began receiving from peasants a peculiar type of find: stones. Thousands of andesite stones, dark gray and heavy to the touch, engraved with impossible scenes. The official explanation was swift and categorical: a modern fraud. Yet the scale and content of these engravings force a pause, even in the most skeptical of observers. The stones range in size from a fist to a watermelon. Their surface is covered with fine grooves that form sharp images. And it is what these images depict that causes the initial shock. We see humans, clearly humans, interacting with dinosaurs. Not as primitive hunters, but in complex scenes. A man riding a triceratops, a person using something like a telescope to observe the sky, medical procedures resembling heart transplant surgery and cesarean sections. The reversal of expectation is violent. Science establishes that dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago, and Homo sapiens emerged only about 300,000 years ago. The two timelines never touched. The Ica Stones, therefore, are either a glaring anachronism or a colossal lie. Skeptics attacked forcefully. The stones had no stratified archaeological provenance. They were discovered by peasants who sold them. The engraving technique, though made to look ancient, could be replicated with modern tools like dentist drills. Dr. Cabrera himself, a fascinated man, was seen as the architect of an elaborate personal fantasy. But there were disturbing details. The quantity was overwhelming: over 15,000 stones. The iconographic consistency, despite the different supposed artists, was remarkable. And some stones, when subjected to analysis, showed a patina of oxidation in the grooves of the engravings that suggested age. Inconclusive tests generated more doubts than certainties. We accelerate the catalogue of absurdities. The scenes show maps of unknown continents, representations of star systems, advanced astronomical knowledge, flight technologies, all of this engraved on volcanic rock. The central problem remains: fraud or evidence? If it is fraud, it is one of the most ambitious, costly, and philosophically complex ever conceived. What would be the motivation? If it is evidence, it completely destroys our understanding of paleontology, archaeology, and human history. This places us in uncomfortable terrain. The Ica Stones cannot be easily integrated. They are a foreign body in the historical narrative. We are forced to choose between two equally disconcerting truths. Either human capacity for forgery is deeper and more creative than we imagine, or our timeline is fundamentally wrong. They function like a mirror. What we see reflected in them is not the past, but the limits of our own capacity to believe. We move from the Peruvian desert to the rocky foundations of a road in Scotland. The year is 1844. Workers were breaking stone in a quarry at Kingoodie, near Glasgow. From inside a solid block of rock, from the old red sandstone formation dated to the Devonian period, something fell. It was not a pebble or a common fossil. It was a hammer, an iron hammer with a wooden handle, encapsulated in rock concretion for millions of years. The official explanation, when confronted with such a fact, tends towards silence or complex geological explanations. Yet the object itself defies any simple explanation. The artifact is small, with the iron head measuring about 10 centimeters. The handle, of fossilized wood, is integrated into the metal head. The rock that enveloped it, the old red sandstone conglomerate, was dated between 360 and 460 million years old. The inversion is brutal. According to our knowledge, at that time, life on Earth consisted of primitive fish, vascular plants, and the first insects. Dinosaurs did not even dream of existing. And Homo sapiens? It would be hundreds of millions of years in the future. How can an object of forged iron and woodwork exist inside such ancient rock? Logic breaks down. The first reaction, naturally, is that of fraud or misinterpretation. Perhaps the hammer fell into a recent fissure and minerals precipitated around it, creating the illusion of antiquity. But the accounts from the time are clear. The artifact was released when the solid block was broken. It was inside the rock. We accelerate the implications. If genuine, the Kingoodie Hammer is not just an part, an out-of-place artifact. It is a silent annihilation of the entire chronology of human evolution and metallurgy. It suggests the existence of an advanced technological civilization in the Devonian period, or even more disconcertingly, the intervention of something or someone from outside our timeline. Conventional science rejects the piece. The lack of controlled archaeological context, the fact that it was discovered by workers and not archaeologists, and its isolated nature make it easy to dismiss. It is considered a curiosity, a modern hammer embedded in ancient rock. And that's that. But the touch of the object, in photos, is revealing. The wood of the handle is lignified, turned to stone. The iron of the head shows an unusual type of corrosion. The rock concretion around it looks like a second skin, a geological time capsule. This places us before an epistemological impasse. What carries more weight? The absolute authority of the established geological and evolutionary framework, or the physical evidence of a single anomalous object? The Kingoodie Hammer is small, but its weight is metaphysical. It forces us to consider the possibility, however remote, that the history of Earth and of intelligent life upon it may be non-linear, perhaps cyclical, or that there are gaps in our understanding so vast that an entire hammer can be lost within them. It is the question made of iron and stone. What if everything we know about the deep past is incomplete? We leave the stone and metal artifacts and enter the realm of parchment and pure enigma. In the library of Yale University, locked in a vault, rests a book that has resisted all decipherment for over a century, the Voynich Manuscript. The official explanation oscillates between considering it an elaborate Renaissance fraud or a ciphertext. Yet, after decades of analysis by the brightest minds in cryptography, linguistics, and computer science, it remains a wall of inaccessible meaning. And this, in itself, is profoundly anomalous. The manuscript is small, with about 240 pages of fine vellum. Its pages are filled with a fluid cursive script in a completely unknown alphabet. It flows from left to right, with an apparent structure of words and phrases, but none of those words correspond to any language, living or dead, on our planet. This is the first and greatest reversal. We, a species that deciphered Egyptian hieroglyphs and cuneiform, are completely defeated by this code. And it is not just text. The pages are illustrated with a profusion of vivid and bizarre images. Plants that do not exist in known botany, with ghostly leaves and anthropomorphic roots. Astronomical diagrams showing unrecognizable constellations. And perhaps the most famous section, a series of illustrations of naked women immersed in or connected to strange systems of tubes and vessels. reminiscent of diagrams of a lymphatic or alien hydraulic system. We accelerate the failures. During World War II, the best code breakers of the Allied forces, the same ones who broke Enigma, tried. They failed. Modern supercomputers, running complex statistical analyses, confirm that the text possesses structural patterns of a natural language. It has entropy, it has word repetition, but cannot link it to any linguistic family. It is a coherent system that does not communicate with us. But there was a revealing sensory detail. In 2009, mass spectrometry analysis conducted at the University of Arizona dated the vellum. The result? Between 1404 and 1438. The manuscript is genuinely old. This rules out many modern fraud theories, but deepens the mystery. Someone, in the 15th century, invested a fortune in high-quality vellum and years of meticulous work to produce nothing? Or to produce knowledge so secret that its key was lost forever? The most unsettling answer came not from linguistics, but from information. Some researchers suggest that the Voynich is not a code to be broken, but the representation of an artificial language or a radically different perception of reality. The plants might be pharmacopoeias of altered states of consciousness, the diagrams, maps of energy bodies. It does not hide a herbal treatise, it hides an ontology. This brings us face to face with the limit of our understanding. The Voynich Manuscript is an opaque mirror. We see our own image reflected as a shadow, a vain effort of decipherment. It proves that there can exist, literally within our reach, a complete system of thought to which we have no access. It is the physical evidence that the past may hold secrets, not just of engineering, but of consciousness, that are indecipherable because we lost the key, not to the code, but to the mind that created it. We leave the organic world of parchment and enter the realm of pure mineral and the apparently impossible. In South Africa, miners excavating pyrophyllite deposits, a soft mineral about 3 billion years old, began finding strange objects. They are known as the Klerksdorp Spheres. The official geological explanation is clear and reassuring. They are natural mineral concretions, common spherical formations in sedimentary rocks. However, the appearance and reported characteristics of these spheres persistently challenge that simplistic explanation. The spheres are small, ranging from the size of a nut to that of a tennis ball. They are composed mainly of a mineral called wollastonite, with an outer shell of an extremely hard nickel-steel material. But it is their shape and details that cause astonishment. Many are perfectly spherical. Others feature a circumferential groove or indentation so straight and precise it appears to have been machined. The inversion is immediate. Nature produces rounded shapes, yes, pebbles, water droplets. But it does not spontaneously produce perfect spheres with equidistant grooves in 3 billion-year-old ore. Miners' accounts, though anecdotal, add a layer of mystery. They claim that the spheres, when placed on a level surface in a specific location of the museum that houses them, roll spontaneously, very slowly, as if possessing an internal gyroscope. Science dismisses this as legend or the effect of subtle vibrations. But the myth persists, attached to the object. We accelerate the anomalies. The age is the first shock, 3 billion years. At that time, the only life on Earth were primitive microbial colonies. The host rock, pyrophyllite, forms under intense heat and pressure. How does a perfectly symmetrical sphere, and especially one with a precise groove, survive that violent geological process without deforming? Natural concretions are generally nodular, irregular. The orthodox geological answer is firm. They point to crystallization processes in concentric layers around a nucleus, a phenomenon called concretionary growth. The groove, they argue, could be the result of a difference in sediment composition that was later selectively eroded. It is a possible explanation, but for many, it is not satisfactory. When holding one of these spheres, and some are on display, we feel its dense, unusual weight. The surface is smooth, almost glassy in some spots. The groove, when present, is sharp under the fingertip. It looks intentional, This brings us to the core of a debate that goes beyond archaeology. We are in the territory of pseudoscience versus established science. The Klerksdorp Spheres have become an icon for theories of ancient astronauts and pre-human civilizations. For geology, they are merely a slightly more peculiar natural curiosity. The true mystery, therefore, perhaps lies not in the sphere itself. It lies in the inability of any explanation, natural or artificial, to fit perfectly. They occupy an uncomfortable space in our knowledge. They are regular enough to seem manufactured, yet natural enough to be explained. They force us to confront our desire to see intelligent patterns where perhaps only the sublime and complex randomness of nature exists. Or conversely, to question whether our definition of natural is broad enough to encompass all the possibilities of a past as deeply alien as outer space. We have traveled a path of paradoxes. From the mathematical code in Genesis to the impossible spheres of Precambrian Africa. Each artifact, each manuscript, each discovery functioned as a crack in the smooth surface of the history we were told. The official explanation for each of them exists, it's true. Fraud, coincidence, dating error, natural concretion, pareidolia. These are the tools of reason to maintain order in the past. Yet, when we bring these 7 cases together, a larger pattern emerges. Not a pattern of conspiracy, but a pattern of ignorance, of profound forgetting. The final inversion lies not in any specific object. It lies in our own position. We consider ourselves the pinnacle of knowledge, the civilization that has unraveled the secrets of the atom and the genetic code. But these artifacts whisper a different truth. They suggest that the thread of human discovery is not linear. It breaks. It gets lost at sea, is buried by the desert, is encapsulated in rock and forgotten in libraries. We are not necessarily progressing in a straight line. We are perhaps rediscovering in truncated and repeated fashion fragments of knowledge that were already possessed and lost countless times. What unites the Baghdad Battery and the Antikythera Mechanism? It is abandoned practical sophistication. What connects the Ica Stones and the Kingoodie Hammer? It is the violent anachronism that challenges chronology. The Voynich Manuscript and the Genesis Code speak of encoded information beyond our current reach. The Klerksdorp Spheres confront us with the possibility of a past so remote it becomes unrecognizable. Everything was wrong. Or perhaps everything is simply incomplete. These objects are not proof of gods or ancient astronauts. They are symptoms. Symptoms of how fragile the transmission of knowledge is across millennia. Of how many wars, catastrophes, and simple decays can erase centuries of technical and philosophical progress. This leads us to a final question, not about the past, but about the future. What parts of our current knowledge, our engineering, our medicine, our physics, will be inexplicable to archaeologists in the year 5000? What artifacts of ours will be catalogued as out of place by a civilization that has forgotten how a microchip or a lithium battery worked? Each of these 7 mysteries forces us to question not only history, but the very nature of human progress. They remind us that we are heirs to a narrative full of gaps. If you want to be on the front line of these discoveries, unraveling new enigmas and re-examining the old ones, subscribe to the channel. The journey through hidden history is just beginning. Which country are you watching this reflection from? Write in the comments where you are observing us from, as we try to piece together the forgotten fragments of our collective past. Until the next discovery.